Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the AAS YouTube channel. And this one is going down the Teaching Astronomy Online. And we're going to cover some interdisciplinary tools today with Andrew Fraknoi. Hi, Andrew.
Yes, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well this morning. It's going to be, the next couple of days are probably going to be the hottest days of the year in Phoenix. We'll probably get up to about 117, 118 F.
Wow.
So it's going to be toasty today.
And here we are shivering in the fog in San Francisco.
Something about a Mark Twain quote comes to mind there, yes? Coldest winter I ever spent was the San Francisco. Okay, so Andrew's going to go through some interdisciplinary tools for your online teaching, and so we're going to turn it over to Andrew. So why don't you go ahead and put up your slide deck and take us away.
All right, and I need to, somehow my slide deck has disappeared. So I need to go and find it. Can you see it?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, so I need to be, interesting. Whatever we did. Here we go. Now can you see it?
Looks absolutely great.
Good. All right. Slideshow from the beginning. There we go. Sorry about that. All right. So what I want to talk about today is looking at astronomy through some different lenses. I think many of us teaching introductory astronomy classes face the fact that our students are majoring in a wide range of other subjects and sometimes don't see the connection between astronomy and some of the subjects they're more thoroughly into. And so these are some ideas that I've developed over the years and with help from a lot of colleagues about ways to include other aspects, particularly aspects that students are familiar with through popular culture to liven up your introductory course. Of course, astronomy is all around us, whether you have an astronomical sweet tooth or whether you're trying to get a good meteor bite in the morning before you get to class. This has been very exciting that dark matter has now found its way into the commercial sphere. And I love the one on the right, which is, if you read carefully, is dark matter growth accelerator, some kind of hormonal thing from health food stores, but very appropriate to what we now know about dark matter and the growth of galaxies. Of course, most people know about astronomical cars, including that the Subaru brand means the Pleiades in Japanese. But I generally like to start a lab or a section meeting of classes like this by doing this as an icebreaker activity. How many astronomical products can the students come up with? And it shows that they know more about astronomical terms, certainly, than they might suspect. Of course, you can't leave out alcohol. There's a wide range of astronomical beers. Dennis Schatz, the astronomy educator, has been collecting these, and I have this slide from his collection. And this is just to remind us that the Neowise comet is not the only comet that's part of our culture. In addition to products, you can also enjoy showing some astronomical bumper stickers. These are some of the ones that we've developed at the Astronomical Society of the Pacific. And if you go to my website, you can find images of all of these that you're free to use in your classes. There's the whole hobby of astrophilately. Lots of astronomical phenomena are portrayed on stamps. International stamps are especially good at this. I often discuss astronomers in an introductory class by showing a stamp that features that particular astronomer. And there's even a study unit, an astronomy study unit of the American Topical Association among stamp collectors.
Cool.
But in particular, today I want to talk about my own favorite way of incorporating the humanities into astronomy lectures, and that's music. A wide range of astronomical music has now been produced, both classical music and popular music. At the end of this little section, I will tell you a catalog that you can get free on the web, where I've put together 240 examples of music inspired by serious astronomy. Let's begin with some music about astronomers themselves. Certainly no one more connected to music than Kepler, who thought that there was a harmony of the spheres in the solar system. And Paul Hindemith, a 20th century composer, has written an entire opera about this connection between astronomy and music called The Harmony of the World. But in the modern day, Philip Glass, a minimalist but popular composer, has written a series of operas about astronomers and physicists. This is perhaps his best known one about Kepler, also incorporating some of Kepler's astronomical and musical ideas in the same work. There's a Galileo opera, which has recently been premiered. And then there's the old chestnut Einstein on the Beach, which was performed at the Met and several other opera companies over the years. Stephen Hawking has inspired a number of pieces. My favorite is a song by Todd Rundgren called Hawking, which is on his Nearly Human album. And in it, Rundgren meditates on how difficult it must have been to have Hawking's mind in Hawking's body. And it's quite a touching piece. The composer Leo Smith turned out to have been good friends with Fred Hoyle. This was back in the 1950s and 1960s. And together, for the 400th anniversary of Copernicus's birthday, came up with a piece called Copernicus, in which Hoyle wrote a credo, a statement of belief for the piece, which is really quite moving as an astronomer's view of nature and the universe. And all of these pieces that I'm talking about are available either in CD, or you can simply get them on YouTube, where a lot of these pieces have been uploaded over the years. Smith and Hoyle actually went hiking together and told the story that they often debated who would be more important if somehow they were transported into the future, a 20th century composer or a 20th century astronomer. And Hoyle then actually worked this out in a science fiction novel he wrote called October the 1st is Too Late, which I think is the first fictional working out of the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. There's certainly lots of music about the moon and the planets. I'll just give you a few of these. My favorite song is Walking on the Moon by the Police, in which the idea of walking on the moon and feeling light because of the gravity is compared to the sense of being in love. And I think that's a very nice and romantic song. Now, many of us, when we think about the planets and music, think of hosts, the planets, and even NASA has used this in various activities. But I need to tell you, if you don't know, that the planets was actually composed about the astrological characteristics of the planets and not their astronomical properties. And this provides a moral dilemma for those of us who are strong anti-astrology and anti-pseudoscience battlers. If you're not happy with the astrological, the planets, you can see here on this album made by Sir Simon Rattle and the Berlin Philharmonic that a number of other composers have since then written pieces that are about the astronomical characteristics of objects in the solar system, such as the asteroid Tutatis or Ceres and so forth. So you can find other pieces that are more astronomical in their inspiration. Certainly the constellations have provided a lot of fodder for music over the years. The composer Philip Glass, who I mentioned before, was commissioned for the 2004 Olympics to write a piece about the various views of the constellation of Orion by different cultures, and the music is then performed on the indigenous instruments of those cultures. And that's a very interesting piece that's available, the Philip Glass Orion. The proverbial bad boy of electronic music, John Cage, has written pieces in which he has simply put the music paper, a transparent form of the musical notation paper over a star atlas, and wherever the stars happen to be in the atlas, that's where notes fell on the staff. This is a far more exciting idea in theory than in listening. So you might want to hear this piece before you play it for your poor students. More familiar music and more pleasant music. Bruce Lazarus has written an entire suite of piano pieces about the Messier catalog. And again, these are available on YouTube if you search for them. Certainly the Lives of Stars have provided lots of inspiration. And by the way, you can see I'm also showing my collection of cartoons about astronomical objects. And if you don't have your own collection of cartoon slides, I suggest you take a look at the Astronomy Cartoons Facebook page. There's an entire Facebook page that's devoted to people sharing astronomical cartoons that they use in their classes. I've shared some things there as well. And so I really enjoy using cartoons, not just in my lectures, but also on my exams to make students feel a little bit better. But perhaps the best known piece about stellar evolution is this nerd group called They Might Be Giants, and their interpretation, why does the sun shine? The sun is a mass of incandescent gas, which became quite a popular song among nerds. The black holes are a wonderful subject for songs and music. Perhaps the best known of those is the Rush song on the album Farewell to Kings called Cygnus X1, which was actually made into a Marvel comic book, which you can also get on the web. And here are some of the lyrics to Cygnus X1, where you can see that someone in this group really does know some astronomy, because they've included some astronomical ideas in the song. So I encourage you to check that out. Here's Amanda Lear and her song, Black Holes. And so these are 2 of 5 songs that I know that actually cover the astronomy of black holes, that actually have not just black holes in the title, but cover the astronomy of black holes. And the catalog that I'll give you a reference to in a minute has the other 3. And you could challenge your students to find the other 3 if you don't know them. There's music about galaxies that has been put together by a number of different people. Perhaps the funniest song has to do with an observation in the 1960s that the quasar CTA 102, this was some Russian radio astronomers, had in it some coded radio transmissions from another civilization. And this was a big story for a little while, until other observers said, no, there was nothing unnatural about the radio emissions from CTA 102. But the story inspired the Byrds, a group in the 1960s, to write a song called CTA 102. And that in turn inspired Eugene Epstein, a radio astronomer at the Aerospace Corporation, to learn the names of the people who made up the singing group, the Byrds. And then when he was submitting a paper about the quasar CTA 102 to the Astrophysical Journal, in the page-proof stage, he then included a private communication in the references, which was from the people who were the members of the Byrds. And somehow the editorial staff didn't catch it. And so this...
Well. Something tells me I'm going to have to look this one up.
Yeah, this became part of the Astrophysical Journal. He then sent it to the studio, where the Byrds were doing their work, and eventually got in touch with Roger McGuinn and other members of the Byrds, and they had a fun exchange about this way of getting a rock group into the Astrophysical Journal. There's also more recently the Hubble Cantata, a very ambitious piece with chorus and classically trained singers, which includes many of the images from the Hubble Space Telescope, and also some of Mario Livio's eloquent words. about the work of the Hubble. So this is also something you can check out on the web. Which leads me then to the whole idea of using astronomical data to produce music. There's an older piece by Charles Dodge, an electronic piece, in which the notes in the piece are based on the Earth's magnetic field, the index that of geomagnetic activity that's controlled by the sun, and that shows us the level of activity in the Earth's magnetic field. Again, an intriguing idea, not an easy piece to listen to, but it's called Earth's Magnetic Field by Charles Dodge. And then more recently, Alex Parker and Melissa Graham have put together the Supernova Sonata, which you can find on the web, in which the notes in the piece are controlled, not just the frequency of the notes, not just the tones, but actually the intervals and what instrument plays, I mean, and what kind of emphasis is given to the notes is controlled by the properties of type 1a supernovae in a catalog. And this actually sounds much more pleasant than my description might make it sound. So I encourage you to look at the Supernova Sonata on the web. Cosmology also inspires a variety of pieces. Perhaps my favorite is by Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, and it's a piece called Wilhelm, which is the ancient Greek term for the primordial substance from which the universe came, which was introduced to astronomy by George Gamow. But in this piece, Wilhelm, the orchestra plays a big bang, and then the musicians are instructed to move outward to simulate an expanding universe, move into the concert hall, come back together, play another big bang, then expand again and leave the hall entirely. It's a rather bizarre piece, but an interesting illustration of the oscillating universe. So anyway, if you want to see these and many other crazy pieces which were inspired by astronomy, the catalog is at this shortened address, bit.ly/astronomy music. And the catalog includes a direct link to where you can find each piece. So that will save you the searching that I've been talking about in this part of our discussion. So bit.ly/astronomy music is where you can find a lot of these connections. All right, I'm going to move on then very briefly to astronomy-based plays and films. Again, there's a short catalog that I've put together of these, but many of these are things that are in the popular culture. One of the best plays that I've seen about astronomy is about Henrietta Leavitt. It's called Silent Sky by the playwright Lauren Gunderson, whom you see on the right here. Silent Sky has been performed by theater groups around the country. You can find excerpts on the web. And it's entitled Silent Sky because Henrietta Leavitt was hearing impaired and was going deaf as she was doing her work. But it's a lovely evocation of her work at the Harvard College Observatory and the discoveries that she made about Cepheid variables and some of the struggles that the women had there to have their work count. There's also an Australian play called Bright Star about the cosmologist Beatrice Tinsley, commemorating her work. She died much too early. And there are plays about Galileo, several plays about Caroline Herschel. You can certainly find those. And then there are films. One of my favorites is The Heavenly Body, a black and white film in which the neglected wife of an astronomer turns to an astrologer when he spends too much time at the telescope, and then he has to win her back. Anyway, a listing of these astronomical plays with a short summary and some films that are not just science fiction films, because there's lots of science fiction films about space, but films that either feature an astronomer as a character or have some good astronomy in them, like Interstellar, for example, or The Martian, are listed there at bit.ly/astroplays. And again, students can bring you examples of films that they've seen that feature astronomical scenes, and that way they can become part of this process of finding interdisciplinary connections. Let me finish up this brief tour by talking a little bit about science fiction, written science fiction in this case. And I've been making a little study of science fiction by astronomers. Certainly the first work was Kepler's Somnium, which is more a fantasy than science fiction, but it is a story in which the protagonist gets to go to the moon and learn more about the moon. And that began a whole series of science fiction stories by scientists. Simon Newcomb, the great turn of the century American astronomer, wrote a novel called His Wisdom, the Defender, in which a scientist kind of gets to take over the world, a fantasy that perhaps many of us have. And this is now out of copyright, so you can find it in Google Books and in other places on the web. His Wisdom, the Defender by Simon Newcomb. I think the best known scientist, astronomer, science fiction writer was Fred Hoyle, who sometimes said that he had to write his science fiction stories when the topics he wanted to cover were not accepted in the Astrophysical Journal and the monthly notices by editors whose minds were too closed. So when he wanted to talk a little bit about organic molecules in interstellar clouds before that became a thing, a discovery, he found that some of his papers were rejected, and that led him to perhaps his most famous novel, The Black Cloud, in which a cloud of interstellar material not only has a tremendous range of interstellar molecules in it, but those molecules gather together to become an intelligent being. And then this cloud in its travels comes between the Earth and the sun, and it's a matter of life and death to communicate with it. So another novel in which astronomers become very important in the world. The dean of scientists, science fiction writers is Gregory Benford, who is a retired plasma physicist who sometimes does astrophysics from the University of California at Irvine. And his stories and novels are not only evocations of modern science and up-to-date science, but are also beautifully written. He's a wonderful writer in addition to being a good scientist. This is a collection of his stories. Perhaps his best known novel, which won all the awards in science fiction, is called Timescape, in which tachyons are used to communicate backwards from a ravaged Earth, to communicate backwards in time to our era, to beg us to save the world. And this novel actually features some astronomers, some thinly disguised like Carl Sagan, and others in their real selves as part of the action of the book. So Timescape by Gregory Benford. The more recent astronomer who has done amazing work in science fiction is Alistair Reynolds, a British PhD who worked for a while for the European Space Agency. And some of his books are, again, a wonderful combination of modern astrophysics with the latest ideas and good characterization and interesting ideas. He's kind of a film noir science fiction writer, has some of that feel of film noir. The novel I would start with is Revelation Space, which begins a whole series that he's become famous for. But my favorite story of his is called Beyond the Aquila Rift. And it is perhaps the best evocation of astronomical distances that I've ever read. So if you can find that story, it's, I think, would be of great interest to your students trying to get their minds around the distances that we talk about in astronomy. Jeff Landis, an astronomer at NASA, has written short stories about a variety of astronomical topics, and also has this novel about being stranded on Mars called Mars Crossing that is informed by a really good understanding of the nature of the Martian surface. Yoji Kondo, the late Yoji Kondo, who was a NASA solar physicist, wrote science fiction under the pen name Eric Kotani. And this is a novel he wrote with a professional science fiction writer called Supernova. And it's the only novel I know that has an HR diagram in it as part of what makes up the novel. So that's a collector's item. I think many people know about Carl Sagan's novel Contact, which was made into a film where Jodie Foster actually came to the SETI Institute and briefly studied with Jill Tarter on how to portray an astronomer like her in the movie. But other well-known astronomers have also tried their hand at science fiction. Bill Hartman, who is one of the architects of our modern theory of the moon's origins, has written both stories and this novel called Mars Underground that I like. And J. Craig Wheeler, the former president of the AAS, wrote a novel called The Crone Experiment, which is about good science. And I recommend that you try to get a hold of it. This is more rare. There is, of course, the movie Interstellar, which came from work that Kip Thorne did on black holes. And we're told that the depiction of the big black hole in the movie Interstellar was worked out on a supercomputer from calculations done by Thorne and his students, and that they were happy to find that the budget that the film had available for supercomputer simulations was greater than the budget that Caltech had available. So they were able to do more sophisticated simulations for this movie. Mike Brotherton is an astronomer at the University of Wyoming, who not only writes his own science fiction, but has done a real service for the community by collecting together science fiction written by astronomers. He has a free collection on the web that you can access. And then recently, Springer has put together a collection. He let him put together a collection that they published called Science Fiction by Scientists. And I was thrilled to have one of my stories included in this collection. So I'm glad that that's still available. That's something you can get. And again, I've put this together into a catalog that you can get on the web at the address bit.ly astrosci-fi. So in this catalog, I've organized the science fiction that has good astronomy in it by topic. So you can find science fiction stories about black holes, science fiction stories about Mars, science fiction stories about realistic space travel, etc., organized by topic. And there's, whenever the science fiction is available on the web, I've put a link to it into this catalog, so you can go directly from that link to the story. So even if your students can't afford to buy science fiction books, there's often stories that they can find for free on the web. And I've often found that showing students a short story, especially that portrays Mars or the moon correctly, is a nice way to supplement their learning. Well, I want to finish by mentioning that not all colleagues agree that this is a good approach to astronomy. Here, Lucy's expressing some of their sentiments. And there are people who don't like to delve into the humanities or feel a little bit nervous about it. But I found that it really gets the students thinking. It shows them that astronomy has inspired people in other fields, and it often inspires them to do a little better in your course. So I do recommend that you take a look at that. I welcome suggestions for my catalog, and you can reach me at this email address. And then if you want to see other listings that I've put together, this is what I do for a hobby. I put together resource guides and catalogs like this. Some people play golf, some people like to knit. I put together bibliographies. And you can find many of the other bibliographies I've put together at my own website, which is just fraknoi.com. So that's what I wanted to tell you about interdisciplinary approaches.
Andrew, thank you so much. That was awesome. Even I learned a few things on that one I didn't know. So we are going to put the links. So you saw several of bit.ly links in the presentation, and I will dig those out and I will put those in the description below the video, along with Andrew's website. And I will certainly do my homework on a APJ paper that cites the bird. So I will.
Now you need to show them your T-shirt before we go.
Yeah, this is my people who's watched this channel for a while will recognize that. That's the 7 corridors of the current AAS journals, and we have a whole video series on those corridors. And
so, and I'm wearing my astronomical tie, and that's another way to inspire your students to take themselves a little less seriously, to show them astronomical clothing. I think there's a group of astronomers calling themselves Startorial, who make available astronomical clothing and astronomical jewelry. So I recommend that as a way to humanize yourself in your course.
And we'll put a link to Startorialist in the description as well below. So we'll have a whole bunch of links in this description. So
great.
That was really cool. That was awesome. Yeah, and just from my personal experience, it's I personally like leading off a course with a quote, an astronomical quote, and then I will begin usually an intro with some humanities or art. I particularly like painted arts, sculptures of astronomy, and then it's just a nice lead into the more core material that you're presenting, and it just makes it go over so much smoother with students who are not going to grow up to be astronomers, who don't want to be astronomers. It just makes it more friendly to them. So I highly recommend.
I've given extra credit sometimes to students who have come up with items like this, who make their own list. And it encourages them particularly to talk about it among themselves, to find astronomy in everyday life. So I agree with you.
In fact, one of the things I do in my courses, I do what's called a design project at the end. So it's only, it's worth 40 points, which is, less than 1% of the total. But I encourage them to express whatever astronomy they want in whatever medium they want. And so people over the time have done just about every medium of human expression there is. And even though it's a small number of points, some of them are just, it's amazing how much time they invest in their art projects or in their projects. And it's just it's a great way to really engage them and let them express their humanitarian side of the game.
Yes.
So, very cool. All right, everyone, that'll do it for this edition of Teaching Astronomy Online Interdisciplinary Tools. Andrew, thank you so much again for sharing with us.
My pleasure. I hope it leads our viewers to some interesting interactions with their students.
Indeed. See you, everyone. Bye-bye.